Welcome everyone to Space City X-Files, the podcast that explores the great mysteries of the unknown. I'm Rick, your host, and today we delve into the bizarre story of a man who claims to have been abducted by aliens while working on a logging crew in Arizona in 1975. Now, despite the skepticism and ridicule of many, this brave guy has remained steadfast in his account of this strange encounter and has even become an advocate for people who claim to have shared similar incidents. Join us as we examine the evidence and theories surrounding this fascinating case to try and separate fact from fiction. This is episode 26, the Travis Walton Incident. A few quick announcements. Space City X-Files appreciate you listening to today's episode. And whether you're a new friend or a long-time listener, one thing you're going to notice today is that we run no commercials or ads here. That allows us to give the best possible experience, and we'll do everything we can to keep it that way. This is where your support plays a huge role for us. After you listen to the episode, whatever platform you're on, please take a few minutes to leave us a review on what you thought. Your feedback helps us grow by bringing awareness to the show, which in turn will bring new listeners. It'll help us break through that algorithm, and that's what we need. If by any chance you would like to support the show with a monetary donation, you can go to our website, click on the Support Us tab, and there you can type in any amount you want. All proceeds always go back towards the improvement of the program. We thank you for your consideration, and that concludes today's announcements. Alright, so let's get started. We're going to first start with a little background on Travis Walton first. Then we'll go over the case details. And finally, we'll wrap it up with theories and our own personal hypothesis on what happened with this alleged alien abduction. So, at the time of the incident, Travis Walton, he was just a regular guy working a blue-collar job as a logger. And he was contracted to cut clearings into the woods, and this would eventually become new trails or roads that could be formed. And this was taking place in the Apache Sitgraves National Forest near Heber, Arizona. So it's November 5th, 1975, and 22-year-old Travis Walton and his co-workers, Mike Rogers, Ken Peterson, John Goulet, Steve Pierce, Alan Dallas, and Dwayne Smith had just finished up for the day, and they were preparing to head out of the woods and take off home for the day. And when they reached the truck, Travis and the crew see a bright light shining through a clearing in the trees that led deeper into the forest. This doesn't seem like too big of an issue for the guys. Travis states in an interview with Joe Rogan that they all thought it was probably just a light from a deer blind or something. So nobody was overwhelmed or freaking out at that point. However, though, Travis played right into the stereotype of every unsuspecting victim in a horror show. He went towards the ominous figure in an attempt to find out what it was. Now, I know we all say I'd never fall for that, or I'd never do that shit, or I'd never do what they did, but maybe you can't say that. Maybe you don't know unless you've been in a situation like that. So anyways, Travis drives in about as close as he can get to the bright light. And then he gets out of the truck and he walks the rest of the way on foot. Now he's doing this against the protest of his co-workers who do have a problem with what they're seeing. So the mood's changed a bit. And so it's safe to say that emotions were kind of starting to run high at that point. Obviously what they were seeing was strange. Beyond what's normally in the woods. So Travis reaches an area where some heavy tree brush kind of opens up into a larger natural clearing. He describes it as a kind of like a meadow area with just grassland. And that's where he sees a large metallic disc-shaped craft emanating a light that he describes strong enough to blanket the whole area. But it wasn't so bright that you couldn't look into it. You can still make out every little contour of the craft. He then states that craft became animate and then started to emit a sound that kind of built up and crescendoed into a powerful, low, thunderous rumble that resonated in your body so you can feel it more than you can hear the noise. Okay, so it wasn't hurting the ears, but you can feel the rumble in your chest. He also stated that there were many high-pitched sounds at the time as the craft began to come alive, kind of like metal scraping, shrieking sounds. The guys are now screaming for him to come back to the truck. They're yelling at him, "Travis, let's go, we need to go," they scream. Now when the craft suddenly starts to rise, this startles Travis, and the only thing he can do was drop down on the ground and kind of take cover behind this big huge log that was laying on the ground. Now this log was between him and the craft, so it was kind of shielding him a little bit. Meanwhile, the craft was about 10 feet in front of him. So meanwhile, the guys are still screaming. They're like, "Travis, let's go, get up, run!" So as soon as he hears that, he hops to his feet. He's about to take his first run or step in the direction towards the truck. And he says that the craft emits a powerful discharge of energy, and this just throws him back several feet. The last thing he can hear is his friend Steve yell, "It got him!" So he loses consciousness, and the next time he wakes up, he would be aboard the craft. Now, before we get into his account of what transpired aboard the craft, let me clarify a few things to help give context into Travis's story. Alright, so one thing is that his friends did return to look for him. After they drove out of the field, they didn't make it far until they realized they needed to go back. Alright, so it's not like they went home and slept on it and then started looking for him the next day. So they went back and they searched for him until daytime. Alright, so one of his friends was like, well, for all they knew, he could have still been lying there on the ground, so it wouldn't be right to just leave him on the ground there. So they went back, looked, couldn't find him. When daylight came, they searched a little bit longer in the daylight, still couldn't find them. And then they drove back to a place called Snowflake, Arizona, which is the closest town, headed towards their home. So they returned to Snowflake, Arizona, and they filed a police report. And they stated pretty clearly that Travis had been abducted by a UFO, possibly. This is their official report. So they didn't mince words. They didn't dance around anything. They didn't say, well, he vanished or whatever. No, they used the words UFO. So the police, they gave a pretty decent reaction to it. They didn't, really clown him or anything like that. They launched an official investigation. They went and they looked and they performed their tests and all that stuff, but they couldn't find any evidence of Travis or any signs of foul play for anything of that matter. It was like Travis just disappeared in the thin air. But still, they were skeptical about the workers' claims, and so they had him take polygraph tests. They said, well, to help rule you guys out of any wrongdoing, why don't you take these tests? They agreed with no problems, no issues, and they all passed the test pretty convincingly. One of the administrators of the test made a comment to Travis's brother saying, "I thought these boys were lying for sure, but after seeing how they passed these tests," he goes, "I believe that they're telling the truth according to their knowledge, without a doubt." The other thing I would like to point out, and this was kind of found out after things had settled down a bit, that other people in the area that same night around the time Travis went missing also came forward and said that they saw bright lights of the craft too that night. So Travis stated in an interview with Joe Rogan that there was another logger that came to him personally and told him, "Travis, I've seen those lights before in the forest, although I didn't go towards them like you did. I just want you to know I've seen them a bunch of times." So Travis would never give this man's name. The man said, that he chose that he didn't want to come out into the public. He was sorry, but the only thing that he can do was just confirm to Travis personally what he saw was accurate. And so there was also a sheriff in the neighboring town that initially reached out to Travis and claimed that he too saw the craft that night. But when Travis tried to get him to come forward, he wouldn't step forward and wouldn't talk and kind of just bowed out. It's possible that he was silenced. Travis made that claim, so I don't know why, but maybe it was how quickly his resolve changed from claiming that he seen something to now saying he didn't. That happens sometimes. But I just wanted to mention these things because it gives insight into what happened during the 5 days that Travis was gone. All right, so now let's look at what he said happened aboard the craft. So when we left off in Travis's story, he'd just been knocked unconscious. And he eventually starts to come to, and he can immediately tell something was wrong with his body. Now, he explains it as if he felt he had experienced a mortal wound, basically like an injury that he would eventually die from, or he felt like that he did die and he came back to life for some reason. It's a strange feeling. I mean, when you listen to him try to explain it, I mean, I don't think he really even understands what it is, and really, to be honest with you, I don't think anybody understands what happens when somebody has an outer body experience or a near-death experience, which we have an episode coming up soon. But there's a lot of there's just so many different things that happen when people experience injuries like that. So I don't blame him for not being able to explain exactly what he felt. Anyways, looking back in hindsight, he stated later in interviews that that injury that he sustained from the craft could have been the reason why the aliens took him aboard in the first place. Now, when they realized that he had been severely injured by the energy blast, they took him in so they could make the repairs, kept him for a few days for observation, and when they realized that the repairs were okay, they dropped him back off outside his hometown. Whatever the case, Travis is coming to now inside the craft, and he realizes that he's laying on a table in a dim room, and lifting his head, he looks up and he sees for the first time 3 aliens approaching him from an open doorway. Now, he describes the aliens as what we know today as a typical gray type alien. So they have the gray color, they have a large head, large eyes, slits for nostrils, a slit for a mouth, and they generally stand anywhere between 3 and 5 foot tall. Now, upon seeing them, Travis falls into a panic. He's freaking out. He reaches over to the table next to him for the nearest object he can find, which he describes as being a large cylindrical piece of glass on the table next to him. So he states he's yelling and he's screaming, but the aliens are motionless and quiet, causing Travis to think that they communicated telepathically. Now, when they come into the range, although he didn't have any strength at all, he said he felt terribly weak. He was able to swing his arm over, striking one of the aliens, causing the first alien to basically fall back and crash into the other 2. Now, when this happened, he rolled off the table in the opposite direction, opposite side of what the aliens were on, and he bolted to the open doorway, which he got through. So he's now in a long corridor. He describes as being a narrow and dark corridor with overhead lights, and he's not sure if it's from his condition or if it was the room itself, but he realizes that he's having a hard time breathing now. And in hindsight, this could have been for many different reasons. It could have been atmosphere, it could have been altitude, it could have been a lot of things. But it's possible that the air was really thin in that hallway. So eventually he comes to another room that's empty, so he tucks away in there to kind of try to hide and get his bearings. And he sees this chair in the center that looks to have like some kind of control center on the armrest. So he sits in the chair, he's checking out this type of screen, and as he's trying to get it to do something, he sees some star constellations illuminate on the ceilings and the floor. As he runs his finger along the screen, he says that the patterns on the ceiling and the floor would rotate along with the designs on the chair screen. He sees no numbers, no symbols, only some lines. Feeling that he's never going to figure it out, his time would be better spent looking for an exit. So he darts back into the hallway, and when he gets back into the hallway, he runs into a man who looks to be in some kind of astronaut suit. Now, Travis states that he felt an instant relief when he saw this person because he had the face of a man. So Travis starts asking him a barrage of questions, but the man doesn't say anything. He only beckons for Travis to follow him, and Travis does. And he leads him down the hallway where there are other human-looking people in the same kind of suit. Again, Travis starts asking him questions, but to his discouragement, they do not answer, and they make little eye contact with him while he's there. They just kind of keep doing what they're doing while he sits next to him. At some point, he loses consciousness again, and when he wakes up, he's laying on the side of the road outside of a town called Herbert, Arizona. Now, as soon as he can gather his bearings, Travis is running full sprint towards town, and he finds, conveniently, the only set of payphones left in the area that are working. With his last bit of strength, he dials his mother's house collect. When his brother answers the phone, all he can muster out is, "It's me, Travis, come and get me." His brother immediately hits the road. He knows where the phone booths are. He knows where the store is, so he's headed that way. And when he pulls up, man, the relief he must have felt seeing his brother, who had been taken for dead, missing 5 days, laying down, passed out in the phone booth. This is the story of Travis Walton, according to his account in various interviews. And after all these years, he's maintained consistency, sparking many familiar with the case to count him as a credible witness of an actual alien abduction. So now that we know the details of the case, let's look at some of the facts and controversies surrounding the incident. One of the main arguments against Travis's claim is people thought it was an elaborate hoax to gain fame and money. Many notable skeptics, one in particular, Philip J. Klass, all jumped on that bandwagon, insinuating Travis and all his associates had collaborated their story and possibly even had professional coaching, which would explain how they were able to pass their polygraph test. It didn't help Travis. It didn't help his case much either whenever he cut a deal with Hollywood to make a full-length motion picture about that night, and the movie was called Fire in the Sky. So basically, this added fuel to the already burning fire for skeptics. In fact, the director was quoted saying that he too thought Travis's story was just a good story, or perhaps a gag that went too far. So after coming to know the people involved personally, the director noted that Travis was much smarter than the other guys he was working with. The director said that Travis possibly laced the guys' drinks with some sort of hallucinogen without them knowing it, and then commenced the hoax. So I don't know what would possess the director to make that claim about Travis, and he didn't know him well, obviously. Maybe as a Hollywood director, he knew a thing or two about lacing drinks. Who knows? But I still don't know what would possess the guy to say something like that, you know? To me, it seems like a pretty elaborate thing to do just to pull off a trick. Not to mention the felony criminal act of drugging 6 people as a gag. But anyways, that was his opinion. The movie was an adaptation of Walton's book, but Travis said that he held no sway over the creative portrayal of the incident. It's worth noting that the alien abduction scene is not what Travis had written in his book, and in all interviews, Travis has been forthcoming that the account was not accurate. The scriptwriter of the movie, Tracy Torme, decided that the book was boring and needed a Hollywood spin to kind of spice things up. Of course, right? Either way, the movie did pretty well. It grossed $19 million off of a $10 million budget. Right now, as it sits, it still has a solid 6 out of 10 on Rotten Tomatoes. And as far as the alien experimental scenes go, many say that the screenplay was like one of the best for its time. I still haven't seen it myself, but it seems interesting. Maybe I'll check it out in the near future. Travis admitted that the movie had a Hollywood spin on it in a bunch of different interviews. We know that. But the damage had been done in terms of the harm it caused with the consistency of Travis's testimony. For those who were keeping a close eye on the case, like the guy Philip J. Klass, they were quick to point out the embellishments to the abduction account. For one, in the movie, when Travis was in the hospital, after some tests on his blood and urine, they detected elevated levels of radiation, something that had become common with abductions at the time the movie was made in the 90s. In the book, however, according to Travis's account, that was not true. Travis was dehydrated and malnourished and had lost an amazing 10 pounds, but his blood and urine were free of radiation. All right, so he admitted that that's not true. He did, however, have a small red circular wound on his elbow that he claims was the single puncture mark left from the UFO abduction. There never appeared to be any physical signs of the energy blast that he claims threw him back. But then again, if the aliens took him aboard for the purposes of healing him, then there really wouldn't be any, right? Or you would think not. So one other quick thing I would like to touch on before we wrap it up is the polygraph test. Now, the claims were made that there were inconsistencies in Travis's story, and that may be true. But when you look at them, when you look at them all together, they were also all about little minor details. Now, he couldn't help what Hollywood did, but he can only control what he said. Now his discrepancies were, like we said, they were like over little tiny minor details. And according to people who know trauma situations, and they've worked with a lot of trauma patients, they all state that this is acceptable when someone has been through a trauma that causes deep emotional and physical harm. Now, Travis has had many evaluations, and the emotional damage that he sustained from the situation, they all say that that's genuine. That's been proven, a few different times. The point is, though, is that Travis nor his friends ever failed any lie detector tests, and they weren't just given one. They were tested by the police station. They were tested by the National Enquirer. They were tested by many UFO organizations, and they all passed convincingly. All right. It's worth noting, too, that a lie detector test given by a qualified technician has an accuracy of 90% in detecting when someone is being deceptive. So it's safe to say, minor discrepancies or not, that Travis and his friends at least believe what they saw. All right. And they weren't being deceptive. And that hasn't changed all these years later. So if you watch the interviews with him today, you can get on YouTube, type in Travis Walton. He's got plenty of interviews. I mean, you can see that he's convinced that something extraordinary happened to him that night. You can just see it in the way he talks, his demeanor, the way he answers questions. Even when people bring up the known fact that a crap ton of people make up stories like these every day just to feel important, those type of questions don't seem to faze Travis. He's very in his interviews, I feel like he's gonna tell his story, and it's not to convince you, it's to tell his story. There's no need to convince, I feel like, whenever he's talking, because of the consistency and the aspect of his polygraph tests and of his companions. Many people familiar with ufology consider Travis's incident to be a genuine abduction. Before we wrap it up, let's hear a little bit of Travis Walton's interview.
After the experiences, I was waking up on the roadway outside of Heber and making my way into the town and trying to find a telephone that worked. And I went into these telephone booths, and I went into the first one and picked up the phone, and it was out of order, which kind of made me feel this surge of desperation. What if these phones don't work? But the next one did work, And the interesting thing is that nowhere on the mountain in any of those towns around there are there any more phone booths. But those phone booths are still there. They're kind of like been preserved all this time because the telephone operator listened in on the call and then knew for a fact that, that report came from there. This is an answer to the skeptics' charges that I was really at my mother's house in Snowflake or some other place. But, the sheriff found out from the phone company that that call was made from that phone booth at that time. So, we have a row of phone booths there, and he were the only ones left on the mountain. Well, at that time, you didn't even have to have a coin to talk to the operator, and so you just pick it up and dial O, and you can talk to the operator. They can't do that now because they would be kept constantly busy with people taking advantage of that. But that's the way it was at the time. So I made a collect call to my family, and operator listened in, reported it to the sheriff, who sent a man right out there who got there right after my family did, and picked me up and took me back to Snowflake. When I was returned, I didn't encounter my co-workers, any of them, for several days. My brother had become extremely concerned about my welfare because of the mob, the circus that was going on in town, the intrusions, and of course some of the phone calls were kind of sinister too. There were some warning calls about people that, there was a woman who was a nurse who said there was an elderly couple who had an experience like this in a hospital where she worked, and when she went off shift, they were there, and when she came back, they were gone, and all records were gone too, and everybody was saying, "No, what are you talking about?" So, they said, she said, just be aware of that. And then this other guy called, he said he was in the CIA, and again, warned, don't let him, just be handed off to the authorities. So my brother took that to heart and kind of kept me away from everybody for a while, for a few days, which, naturally upset the sheriff, but it also kept me away from my coworkers, which had me doing a lot of reality testing. These people are all saying I'm crazy and acting like I'm crazy. I didn't have their corroboration like it would have been if we'd have said, yeah, we went through this. It would have been a lot easier for me to not do this reality testing and say, do more coping with what happened than wondering whether it did or not. Every authority figure around me trying to tell me, no, it didn't happen, and everything in my mind told me it did. So when I finally did meet up with the rest of the crew later, it was very helpful. And, as time went on, more of the outside evidence, independent evidence, came back to me. A lot of it was kept away from me, things the sheriff was aware of and things that went into his file that, people who were in the area, hunters and campers and people who had seen things that he was aware of, he never told me about. So, as time went on, it got slowly better. But it's something, the trauma of which has just never completely left me, and there's still a certain amount of coping to do, even to this day. And something has a tendency to cause my mind to want to go somewhere else, once I've been on the subject, and I guess I've kind of reached that point with this interview, too.
All right. Now, on that note, that brings us to our final segment, where I reveal my own personal thoughts, in this case, about Travis Walton's abduction claim. And this one was really interesting to be able to watch, because there's so many firsthand expressions of him reliving what happened to him that night. All right. And when you can watch somebody retell the story, you get a lot of insight, and you can really get in tune with what they're talking about, and it really allowed me to see it through his eyes and through the eyes of those who were with him that night. So because of this and other reasons, for example, the past lie detector test and the testimony from the organizations that work with Travis, I have to say that it's highly probable that he experienced an actual encounter that night. And I personally would rather call it an encounter, because that's more likely what it was than an abduction. And in their interviews, you'll hear Travis refer to it this way too. It was an accidental encounter. So me personally, I try to stay away from covering abduction cases because there's just so many obvious fakes, and that really discourages people from wanting to learn more about UFOs, about aliens, about what have you, anything that ties into that specific category. And so I kind of stay away from it. And then also I kind of try to stay away from using the word abduction too. What that word has done in terms of what people think about aliens visiting us, I mean, that's done a lot of harm in its own self. That insinuates that the alien beings are going around picking people up, trying to stick stuff up their butts, trying to do other weird things to them. And I'm sorry, but I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people who disagree with me. But I don't think that's kind of silly to me. I don't think that that's what they're here to do at all. And so I would have to disagree with them. I find it extremely hard to believe that an entity that is obviously far more advanced than we are at this point would need to come and experiment on something as primitive as ourselves, in order to understand it. Like, what these guys have mastered interstellar travel, but they need to go through all this to understand how the human body works. I mean, what would be the gain of that, really? I mean, to me, that's like ants to us, for instance. Now, we know that the ants are interesting. We know that they work hard. We know that they create their subterranean structures. But those things we can observe without having to unnecessarily destroy them or disturb them. We don't need to do that. For one reason is because we have the technology that would allow us to do that. We have radar technology. We have less invasive cameras that can look at those type of things. So we don't need to destroy them in order to figure them out or harm them. So how could we think that someone who has already obviously mastered interstellar travel, traveling faster than the speed of light, how could they not have figured that out or figured us out? Basically, something that has already been done that we couldn't do, they've done it. So how could they not understand how we function, if that makes any sense? But anyways, this is just my personal opinion. And you know what they say about those opinions? Everybody's got one. So if you would like to share yours with me, on the case of the Travis Walton, about what you think, whether it was an actual encounter or whether it was a hoax, I'd love to hear what you thought. So the discussion will continue on social media and YouTube and all those good spots. So feel free to drop me a line and let me know what you think. You can also send me an email to info@spacecityxfiles.com. And I would love to hear what you think. Well, anyways, friends, that's going to do it for this episode. And I hope you enjoyed hearing the story of Travis Walton. If you did and you have a few minutes to spare, you thought we did a good job, you want to give us a pat on the back or help us out, you can leave us a review after you listen. Hit those thumbs up, hit those likes, hit those shares, and help us to knock down those walls of these algorithms that are out there. So that way we can get in contact with more truth seekers all over the world. They can hear these stories. Then they can share it with their people, And your feedback, whenever you give it to us, that's what it does for us. It helps us out like that. So we appreciate you. We love you. We thank you again for being here with us today. And we hope to see you on the next one. We got another thought-provoking episode coming up next week. Until then, this is Rick with the Space City X-Files telling you to keep listening keep questioning, keep exploring.
Thank you for listening to the Space City X-Files.